Picture this. It's Sunday afternoon. Half the country is glued to their screens, hearts racing, voices hoarse from screaming at people who can't hear them. Meanwhile, you're sitting there thinking, why does everyone care so much about this? If that's you, science has some fascinating answers. Here's something that might surprise you. Your complete indifference to whether some team wins or loses isn't a personality flaw. It's not about being antisocial or lacking passion. Your brain is literally processing the world differently than the 65% of people who live and die by their team's performance. Let's start with why sports matters so much to so many people. The answer takes us back thousands of years, long before stadiums and championships existed. For most of human history, your survival depended entirely on your tribe. These weren't just your friends or family. They were your protection against predators, your hunting partners, your only chance of making it through harsh winters. Being part of the group meant staying alive. Being cast out meant almost certain death. That ancient wiring doesn't just disappear. It's still buried deep in our brains, constantly looking for ways to activate. And modern sports, they're the perfect trigger. When someone watches their team play, their brain doesn't distinguish between ancient tribal warfare and a basketball game. It releases oxytocin, the same powerful bonding hormone that creates attachment between mothers and babies, between romantic partners, between family members. Their nervous system literally responds as if these millionaire athletes wearing specific colors are members of their own tribe who need protection and support. Think about the language people use. We won. We need to defend better. We're gonna crush them next time. Notice those pronouns. These fans aren't playing. They're not on the field, court, or ice. Yet their brains have created such a strong identification that the boundary between self and team dissolves completely. Now, here's where your brain comes into play. People who don't obsess over sports typically have what researchers call reduced tribal affiliation needs. This doesn't mean you're a loner or incapable of deep connections. It means your sense of identity isn't as dependent on belonging to large, organized groups. You're more likely to form your identity through individual interests, personal values, specific relationships rather than group membership. You don't need to wear someone else's jersey to know who you are. A fascinating 2018 study examined the cognitive patterns of sports enthusiasts versus non-enthusiasts. The results were striking. People with minimal sports interest showed significantly lower levels of in-group bias. Translation, they don't automatically develop negative feelings toward people who support different teams. They don't see the world through an us versus them filter as readily. Their thinking is more nuanced, less binary. They can appreciate skill and talent regardless of which uniform someone wears. This might seem obvious to you, but to a devoted fan, rooting for the opposition's star player feels psychologically impossible, even when that player is objectively brilliant. Let's talk about what's actually happening in the brain during a game, because this is where things get genuinely concerning. Every close play, every potential score, every moment of uncertainty triggers a dopamine release in a sports fan's brain. Dopamine isn't just pleasure. It's anticipation, the what happens next chemical. And sports deliver it in perfectly timed intervals throughout an entire game. Neuroscientists using brain imaging have discovered something remarkable. Watching your favorite team activates the exact same neural pathways as gambling, as checking social media notifications, as any behavior that can become compulsive. The reward centers light up identically, but here's what makes it so powerful: the uncertainty. You don't know if your team will win. That unpredictability is crucial. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, and it's the most addictive reward schedule ever discovered. It's why slot machines work. It's why checking your phone becomes habitual. It's why sports can feel impossible to ignore once you're invested. The mechanism is identical to behavioral addiction. Your brain receives unpredictable rewards at unpredictable intervals, creating a powerful drive to keep watching, keep hoping, keep investing emotional energy. For people who don't care about sports, this entire system simply doesn't activate. Watching strangers compete doesn't trigger your dopamine pathways. And here's something remarkable: this might be partially genetic. Research from multiple universities has identified specific variations in dopamine receptor genes that correlate with interest in spectator sports. Your indifference to whether any team wins might literally be coded in your DNA. You're not choosing to be disinterested. Your neurochemistry is fundamentally different. Sports fans engage in something psychologists call BERG, basking in reflected glory. Pay attention to language patterns after games. When their team wins, fans say, "We won." When the team loses, suddenly it's, "They lost," or "The coach made terrible decisions." This isn't conscious manipulation. It's automatic psychological distancing, a way of protecting self-esteem by tying identity to victories while separating from defeats. People who don't obsess over sports typically show more consistency in their self-concept. Their sense of worth isn't bouncing around based on the performance of strangers. Their self-esteem remains relatively stable because it's rooted in things they actually control: their own actions, relationships, accomplishments, growth. There's something quietly powerful about that stability. While millions of people's emotional states fluctuate wildly based on events entirely outside their influence, non-sports people maintain psychological equilibrium. Their Monday morning mood doesn't depend on what happens Sunday afternoon. Here's something that surprises people: sports fans often score higher on certain empathy measures. They've practiced caring deeply about other people's struggles, victories, and defeats, even when those people are complete strangers who just happen to wear the right colors. So why don't non-sports people feel that same empathy for athletes? It's not that they lack empathy, it's about allocation. Everyone has finite emotional bandwidth. You can't care deeply about everything. Non-sports people typically direct their empathy and concern toward different destinations: social justice issues, environmental causes, the struggles of people in their actual lives, creative endeavors, intellectual pursuits. A comprehensive study found that people with low sports interest scored significantly higher in personality traits related to openness to experience, appreciation for art and beauty, and curiosity about ideas. They're getting their emotional fulfillment from galleries, concerts, books, nature, philosophical discussions, scientific discoveries. Their brains seek the same things sports fans seek: meaning, connection, transcendence, excitement. They're just finding those experiences through completely different channels. Let's address something uncomfortable. For some people, not caring about sports isn't just natural disinterest. It's a defense mechanism built from painful experiences. Maybe they were the last picked in gym class year after humiliating year. Maybe they were mocked for poor coordination, excluded from the social bonding that happened around sports, made to feel inferior because they couldn't throw or catch or run as well as others. Maybe they're pushing back against the aggressive masculinity often tied to sports culture, or the tribalism that sometimes turns ugly, or the way sports can dominate conversations and social spaces to the exclusion of other interests. Maybe they genuinely cannot comprehend why grown adults scream at televisions, paint their bodies, and let their emotional lives be controlled by the performance of people they've never met. Your indifference might have a history, or it might not. You might just find the whole thing genuinely boring, and that's equally valid. This is the core of why sports fans and non-sports people often struggle to understand each other. They're pursuing meaning through fundamentally different paths. Sports fans find profound meaning in narrative, the underdog story that defies odds, the comeback from impossible deficits, the dynasty built through years of dominance, the bitter rivalry spanning decades. These narratives are compelling precisely because they're unpredictable, because they're real people experiencing genuine pressure with actual consequences for their careers and legacies. People who don't care about sports often find that same randomness meaningless. They think, why would I emotionally invest in an outcome I cannot influence, performed by people I don't know, in a competition that has zero impact on my actual life? Neither perspective is wrong. They're just different approaches to humanity's universal need for story, for narrative arc, for meaning. One group finds epic drama in a championship run, in a last-second shot in a season-long comeback. The other group finds equally meaningful drama in novels, in their own relationship journeys, in creative projects where they're participants, in scientific breakthroughs that change human understanding. Researchers describe this as the difference between parasocial investment and direct engagement. Sports fans build intense one-sided relationships with teams and players. They know statistics, personal histories, tendencies, strengths, and weaknesses. They feel genuine emotion about these figures' successes and failures. Non-sports people typically prefer investing their emotional energy where there's actual reciprocity, where their care might actually matter to the outcome, where they're participants shaping the story, not spectators watching someone else's journey. Neither strategy is superior. They're simply different ways of navigating human existence and our need for connection and meaning. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who spent decades studying optimal experience and flow states, found that complete absorption and peak experience can be achieved through countless activities. For some people, it's watching sports. For others, it's literally anything else: playing music, writing, hiking, cooking, building, teaching, creating. Here's something people who don't obsess over sports often report: they feel more present in their own lives. They're not spending 15 hours every week experiencing someone else's challenges and triumphs. They're engaged in their own. They're not living vicariously through athletes' achievements. They're pursuing their own. They're not practicing emotional investment in outcomes they can't control. They're focusing energy on things they can actually influence. There's something quietly radical about choosing to live your own life, rather than obsessively watching other people live theirs. That's not a judgment on sports fans. It's simply an observation about where attention and emotional energy flow. If you don't care about sports, you're not missing some fundamental human experience. You're not defective or boring or emotionally stunted. Your brain's reward system is calibrated differently. Your tribal instincts operate differently. Your empathy flows toward different destinations. Your sense of meaning comes from different sources. And that's not just okay. It's exactly how human diversity works. We're not all supposed to be identical. We're not all supposed to care about the same things. The variety in how we find meaning, connection, and joy is what makes human experience rich and complex. The next time someone asks, "Did you see the game?" and you genuinely couldn't care less, remember, you're not broken, you're not boring, you're not missing out. You're just playing a different game, one that's entirely your own, with stakes that actually matter to your real life. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most meaningful game of all.